Dani Diosi. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today. It's really great to see you. Menopause coach. So, we're going to be talking today about the menopause, perimenopause, I'm assuming as well, and
Yeah,
everything that you can offer to help women through this phase. So, yeah, thanks for joining me.
my pleasure. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, let's have a chat about, I think maybe a good place to start is maybe your experience. I mean, can you tell us a bit about your experience of menopause and what it is that you can offer women going through the same, that are kind of heading towards that phase in life,
Yeah,
and
sure.
how's it been for you?
Okay, so I mean, I've worked with women going through transitional periods for the last 20 odd years. So my previous roles were in the antenatal area. So I used to teach regular antenatal classes. I taught hypnobirthing and I trained professionals to teach hypnobirthing. I'm a qualified hypnotherapist, NLP master coach, mind coding practitioner, and
Okay.
I tended to sort of direct all those tools towards the that transitional period of becoming a parent and everything that entails. And I probably started going through perimenopause maybe about 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. And I was finding it was tough. It was really tough. I'm sure if any listeners are experiencing that phase of their life now, it feels very destabilized, or it can feel very destabilizing. Lots of kind of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What's my purpose? Just feeling really disconnected with everything. And I remember actually saying to my husband that if I was employed, because the businesses were my own, if I was employed, I would be going to the doctor to get signed off sick because I just felt so energyless and the lack of joy or finding joy in everything. And I went to, I went to the doctor, and luckily I was very lucky in that I did have the support from the medical professionals, which I know a lot of people struggle with because the knowledge, depending on who they go and see, it is really sort of pot luck whether the practitioner has got the knowledge and the real deep understanding of what's going on through that menopause transition. Um, but as well as being put on HRT, which definitely helped with a lot of the symptoms, it still didn't feel that I was myself. I still felt like something was a part of me was almost missing. So I started to use a lot of the techniques that I was teaching, the mindset techniques, extensions, basically, on myself, and it was making a huge difference. So it just felt like a natural progress to kind of move my professional work from that stage of women's lives, which they're sort of, as I said, becoming parents, to this stage of a woman's life, which is another huge hormonal transition. It's actually a brain transition, which many people don't realize, and support women at this stage because it can be such a turbulent time. Culture and society for centuries have kind of viewed it as, well, basically, as you can no longer have children, you're defunct to society. I mean, it's not quite as harshly spoken about nowadays, but there's still that sort of feeling that we're getting older, that we are not as effective as potentially we were when we were younger. And I just really basically wanted to support women in reframing that
Mm.
and reclaiming this part of their lives. It's actually, yeah, that chapter might be finished, but you've got a whole new one, a whole new book to start, and that's where it gets really exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a real psychological and spiritual shift, isn't it? As it's
Yeah,
beyond biology, isn't it? It really is.
yeah,
And I think that there's more needs to be done to address this spiritual and psychological shift. And it sounds
yeah.
like you're really kind of applying and implementing some really interesting tools to help with that. So tell us a bit about those tools. So what in your toolbox? So your offering is psychological and spiritual. Tell us a bit about how you're
It's
doing it.
coaching, it's support. I've got basically, I work through something that I've called my harmony framework, which is kind of 6 stages to basically tackle a lot of, um, I kind of call it debris in the subconscious because to do so let me start with the what's actually happening
Yeah.
in menopause. So menopause covers a whole period of time. So you've got the menopause transition, which is basically known as perimenopause, which is when the hormones are fluctuating. So a lot of women who go to the doctors at this time, the normal process is that they'd be given a blood test to assess what their hormones are doing. And unfortunately, many women are dismissed because they're still menstruating. And it might be that on the day that they have that blood test, because the hormones are fluctuating, that's a kind of a good hormone day. So it doesn't show any change. And those women are potentially kind of dismissed, maybe put on antidepressants. They're kind of missing the trick. But the whole thing that's happening in this perimenopause stage is that your body is transitioning from menstruating to not menstruating. And that process with the fluctuating hormones can take years. Okay.
Hmm.
It might not be that long for some, it can be about up to 10 years for others. So it goes on for a really, really long time. The menopause itself is a day, one
Right.
day, which is the day that it has been a year since your last bleed.
Okay.
Okay. And on that day, you have reached the menopause. Everything after that day is postmenopausal. And, there are, I can't think of the statistics off the top of my head because numbers are not my strong point. It's the biggest section of society of are post-menopausal women. So there are a lot of us around.
Yeah.
So people mistakenly think that the menopause just means stopping your periods. And so there's a whole period, excuse the pun,
Yeah.
of time where, because of the fluctuating hormones and because of the transition that is going on in the brain, women find it quite hard um, to cope. They're struggling.
Yeah.
So depending on where women are in that journey, there's potentially going to be different physical symptoms, but there also might be different emotional symptoms. So the techniques that I use kind of basically within this structure of my harmony framework are to figure out with them what are the symptoms that they're finding most debilitating. With physical symptoms, I can obviously teach relaxation techniques and grounding techniques to stop it all becoming completely overwhelming. Anyone who has had a hot flush in public will know what I'm talking about by that. Our kind of natural tendency is to panic and think, oh my God, I'm getting hot. There's nowhere for me to go, which is obviously going to make it worse. So I can kind of teach some techniques to cope with that. Um, and other physical symptoms as well.
Mm.
But it's also about what is their heart and head and gut saying to them about this time. It's not a coincidence that many women during this period completely change careers, completely change their job focus. Many will leave long-term relationships. Many will kind of actually start doing things that are completely out of character, that are perhaps seen as a little bit risky or dangerous. And part of the reason is because we're naturally dropping in hormones. So the hormone, which there's loads of hormones going on, but the estrogen is the main one. Estrogen is the hormone that makes us nurture, it makes us care. It's the hormone that enables us to basically put everybody else before us.
Mm.
And, whether you are a parent or not, it's that sort of doing a million different things at once, multitasking to Olympic levels. Then what happens is as that estrogen starts to drop, it's the focus starts to turn inwards. It becomes much more intuitive, much more instinctive. And it is kind of the time when women start thinking, what about me? You
Yeah.
know, what do I want to do? Am I really happy in this situation? And so many of my clients have that kind of confusion between this is what they're feeling instinctively, that they want something to change, but because of kind of what's expected of them, family situations, whatever, they feel that they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to make that change.
Mm.
So it's really kind of going a bit deeper into what's going on in the subconscious. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to persuade someone to leave their partner if they don't want to leave their partner. I should
Yeah, yeah,
hasten to
yeah.
add. But it's a lot of kind of looking at limiting beliefs that they've held on to for a long time, um, re-examining their identities, who they think they are, who they want to be, um, visualization. So it's a lot of deep
Mm.
work, as well as kind of the sort of the the tools that can actually be used to help with the physical symptoms.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like a real unpacking, I suppose, of the psyche for a next phase in life, isn't it? I think it's
Yeah.
it's it's
Yeah,
and
there's
yeah.
lots of trauma resolution work as well, because again,
Mm.
something else that happens when that estrogen starts to drop is previously it's been acting as a bit of a buffer. Like if you imagine something precious being wrapped up in bubble wrap, so it doesn't get knocked or it doesn't get damaged in transit. So it's the estrogen has basically been providing that bubble wrap
Okay.
and enabling us to experience stuff that happens, but carry on.
Okay.
And again, because the estrogen starts to drop, that bubble wrap starts to disappear, and things which we were able to push down and ignore and carry on regardless won't let us do that. So
Mm.
it's often that we kind of need to do a bit of that trauma resolution before we can start doing doing this sort of the building up of their confidence, etc., etc.
Mm.
Might
It's
be that
like
that holds back.
it feels like a time of renewal and rebirth,
It's
doesn't it? It's
exactly
a
what it
really
is. Yeah.
transformative period of our lives, and it's I think it's really great that there's a real raising of awareness I've noticed over the last maybe sort of 5 years. Seems to
Mm.
be, women are talking about it more. My mother's generation, they've kind of, it just wasn't spoken about.
Yeah.
It was sort of brushed under the carpet, or it
And
was
that's not a good thing.
it's
People
not.
kind of, sometimes I've had discussions with people, well, our mothers just got on with it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they got on with it, but are they okay?
Yeah.
Result of just getting on with it. Just
Yeah.
because we do just get on with things, it doesn't mean that, we're not finding it incredibly difficult. And the expectation that you just get on with it
Yeah.
is part of what's causing the problem. And obviously, different women are going to experience it to different extremes. Some people just float through it, others, really do struggle.
Mm.
Um,
I
and
think I have a question around that. I wonder if what your thoughts are. Um, so what do you think the factors are in your experience that contribute to women either sailing through or having a really hard time? Do you see any patterns? Do you see anything that's kind of linked?
so I think a lot of it is, genetics.
Mm.
So if when women are going through the menopause, if their mothers are still around or they can remember when their mothers went through it,
Mm,
how your mother experienced it is potentially how you might experience it, in the sense that, we tend to, our cycles tend to be similar to our
mm,
mothers. There's that sort of biological connection there. A lot of it is because women are now having children later. So potentially, whereas when our mothers went through the menopause, their children were no longer at home. So, for example, with my mother, I remember her going through it around the time that I got married. So, obviously, I was her focus, but it's not the same looking after adult children. Not as much as kind of logistically, strategically demanded of you when you're not having to do school runs
mm,
and pack lunches and deal with tantrums and things like that. So I think the fact that women are having children later potentially means that they are experiencing everything there is to experience during that menopause transition and having to look after young children.
yeah.
We've also got the other end of the spectrum in that we have our parents are generally, or society is generally living longer. So we are the sandwich generation, if you like. We've got children that we're responsible for, and we also have parents that we're responsible
Mm,
for. So you go from sort of managing one household to managing two, for
yeah.
example.
Mm,
Um, I also think that the way that we live our lives up to the point of menopause is a massive contributory factor.
okay.
So, for example, um, when we finish menstruating, our adrenal glands actually take over the job of producing estrogen for the body. If we have lived our lives stressed, which most of us, let's face it, do without even realizing it, then by the time we get to this stage, our adrenal glands are basically shot.
fried
They're
out.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So they're not able to kind of produce the hormones to support us to a low level.
Hmm.
Previously, women were entering menopause at the time that they were probably either thinking of stopping working or in a society where they weren't expected to work in the same way that they're working now. Whereas nowadays, we are expected to work longer, harder, more continuously. We've got all things like social media, which contribute to stress factors. So I think there are lots and lots and lots of contributory factors that women who are experiencing the menopause now, if they'd lived a generation, two generations ago, possibly wouldn't have had the same experiences.
Mm,
Um, is my theory on it, my take on it.
mm.
And all of this can obviously make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think it's swings and roundabouts as well, though. I think, if we look at maybe in the Victorian era when women were struggling with hormonal shifts, they were often diagnosed with mental illness and put into an institution. So
Well,
now we have a different understanding of that as well, don't we? So there's a
absolutely, but that's a really important factor. I mean,
mm,
if you look at the sort of the history of birth, menstruation, birth, uh, menopause, it is considered, these are all things that are considered as afflictions. They're all considered as part of, um, well, as part of God's punishment to Eve because she
yeah,
tempted Adam in the Garden of Evil.
yeah.
But these were very much, and this is how it was translated. This is how the information was given to congregations. It all stems from, and I'm going to sound like a kind of a raving feminist lunatic here, but it all stems from the patriarchal society
Hmm.
of women of the weaker sex.
Yeah.
Men
We're
are meant to
afflicted.
We're afflicted,
Yeah.
yeah. And everything that
Mm.
we experience is punishment. If women die in childbirth, well, that's their fault.
It
If
must have been God's will, yeah, and all that. Yeah.
exactly. So yes, we're not put in institutions any longer when we get perimenopausal or
Mm.
chucked on the dust heap, but that sort of patriarchal view 100% still remains, because I can absolutely guarantee you that if menopause was a male issue, you'd be able to buy stuff over the counter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's yes, it's great that we're talking about it. It's brilliant that we're talking about it. More and more firms are having people in to talk about the menopause, but it's very interesting that it's almost feels like it's becoming a tick list topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got someone in for a day, they'll talk about the menopause, brilliant tick, we're
Part
inclusive.
of the diversity policy,
Yeah,
etc. Yeah. When
exactly.
yeah.
Without actually understanding what it means for
Mm.
these women, and it affects everyone, because even though it's kind of women going through it, if you're married to a woman who's going through this stage in their life, it's going to affect you. If you're being managed by a woman going through this phase of
Yeah.
life, it's possibly going to affect you.
Yeah.
So I still think we have a long way to go. There's a huge difference between being sort of menopause aware and actually getting it,
Yeah.
kind of support that employees, employers, team leaders, etc., workers need in order to
Mm.
allow
Yeah.
them to go
And
through
I
the transition.
think without getting onto the kind of smash the patriarch train, I think we look at the medical industry and it is so rigged. It's so rigged for the patriarchy. I mean, it's embedded, it's built upon the patriarchal mindset. So, if we're going to see a medical professional, then that's what we're going to get, isn't it? So I
Yeah,
think there's more women now that are really trying to seek alternative treatments, alternative
yeah.
therapies. They don't want to just go to the doctor and get some, hormone
But it's
replacement. They want to try something else, don't they?
exactly, but it's even finding somewhere where they can go.
Mm.
GPs, unless they have taken it upon themselves to become really knowledgeable in the menopause, are they're not experienced. They don't
Mm.
understand. So people might go to gynecologists, but actually gynecologists are not the experts in the menopause, because it's not, we tend to think it must be gynecology because, it's all to do with
Yeah,
your
the
lady
reproductive
parts and
system. Yeah,
reproduction.
yeah.
Not, it's a brain transition.
Okay.
Neurologists certainly aren't the experts in menopause. So it's sometimes it's having to hunt around a lot to find someone who actually understands. And yes, there are menopause specialists out there, but they are expensive.
Mm.
It's not that everybody has access to them. Um, and I think until we get that sorted, then a lot of women are going to be struggling for a hell of a lot longer
Mm.
than they should be.
Yeah, the system's not got a support
No.
system in place. Do you see, I don't know how much of experience you've had internationally, but do you see a difference between our country and maybe the States or East Europe, or how do you see it
Yeah,
globally?
I think there's a lot to be said. So Asian women, so sort of, Eastern medicine and Eastern diets are a lot more supportive. There's been lots of studies done on consuming soy. So if there's, been a huge sort of quantity of that in the diet, then they don't seem to suffer as much as Western women. So
Okay.
I think, yes, it is dependent very much on where we are in the world, but I think that the majority of Western countries, women are going to be experiencing the same discomforts, the same difficulties. I think
Mm,
obviously then the different countries that have, different places in Europe that have are a bit more kind of supportive in general of women are going to fare better. These are the countries where they're probably, they have longer maternity leave for parents.
mm.
They've kind of got a higher rate of um, home birth. That's going to kind of indicate the areas that are probably more supportive of women.
Yeah. And I think a lot more cultures that are more embracing of women and their or not necessarily women, perhaps I mean feelings, emotions and the
Yeah,
more intuitive side of life, I think perhaps they'd fare better than British. I mean, I'm a
yeah,
British woman, I'm an English woman, and I know for sure that there's very much a sense in our culture of you do not speak about your feelings, you do not,
yeah,
you pack it all away. And I think our culture, my culture, is very, very poorly uh, adapted to dealing with intuition and feelings and emotions. We're very stiff upper lip and we don't talk about it. We
yeah.
sweep it all under the carpet. So culturally, I think we're not doing great with with the whole embracing of it. Um,
No,
but yeah, I think diet's another interesting one as well. I notice for sure with my cycle, if my diet's good 1 month, I don't suffer as much if my
yeah,
diet's not so good, and I can really feel that shift. So I mean that crosses across that spans across our whole life. So no wonder our menopausal experience will be affected by diet. If it's just affecting our monthly cycle, it must have
exactly.
a huge impact, mustn't it? So
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of how that whole um time of our lives from sort of starting periods to ending periods, the way that that's viewed. We are taught to carry on regardless when we
mhm,
have our periods.
we
You know,
are.
and it is kind of again with that stiff upper lip,
Mm,
take a paracetamol and carry on. This happens once a month. You can't down tools every single time that you're bleeding. Get on with it. Whereas actually, I think in societies and cultures where it's understood that actually at certain times in a woman's cycle, she needs a bit more downtime and a little bit more sort of nurturing and being able to kind of look after herself, then I think that not only equips people for when, you know, they or their partner get to this stage of their life of menopause, but it also, women are much more in touch with their bodies and understanding their body
mm,
rather than kind of just dismissing it as that this is a nuisance that happens and I just have to get through it, regardless of the fact that I might be cramping or I feel sick or I feel it's it's interesting going back to what you said about mental health generally. Um, I think we are getting better as a nation in recognizing mental health,
mm,
but I think when it is associated with part of this kind of inevitable phase of a woman's life,
mm,
it's almost like, oh, well, we don't want to talk about that.
mm,
It's the same with women who are struggling with endometriosis or anybody who's struggling with endometriosis or any of those conditions. It takes years, years to get a diagnosis because it's kind of considered, well, this is just something that happens.
mm.
It's not that bad. It can't be that bad. Just get on with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So it's
shocking.
kind of yes, mental health is a huge part of menopause, but it's almost seen as, I feel anyway, separate to mental health issues that we talk about
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
general
Yeah.
conversation.
It feels it's a real denial, isn't it, of a process that is actually probably is quite sacred. It's a rite of passage, isn't it? And I think the way that society denies it and shrinks it
Yeah,
and makes it smaller, that's got to have a huge impact on us, hasn't it? It has had to have had a huge impact on us.
because we're kind of taught not to speak out, not to say something when something is a problem. And obviously, many women who are working at this time, and lots of the symptoms of the menopause transition can make it harder to do the job that they have done for many, many, many years, then they have massive issues with their confidence. So they're already feeling, I'm just holding on to my job by the skin of my teeth.
Mm.
If I raise the fact that I'm not happy with the way things are being handled, then I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
Or if they're in positions of leadership, they're very worried about looking weak in front of the team, so they carry on regardless. And women are so good at putting on a mask
Mm.
and you know keep calm, carry on. And it, somewhere along the line that
It's gonna
facade
snap. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a male trait though, isn't it, to carry on and tuck it all away, and like you said just then, yeah, appear with we have that fear of appearing weak if we're in a leadership position. That is a very male framework, and I think when we were living tribally, however that looked for whoever, I think there would have definitely been a sense of women, the communal sense of women gathering and nurturing at these times, and when these rites of passage were
100%.
happening. That's not occurring anymore. We've been put into this masculine framework of behave like a man, but you still have this female feminine process happening that's
Yeah,
not being acknowledged. It's crippling, isn't it? It's crippling.
exactly. And when we were living tribally, women at this stage, they would be considered the wise women,
Yeah.
and everybody else would be going to them for advice. And they probably lived alone. Their children had probably grown up and left home, and they had, quite possibly outlived their partners. So they would be on their own, and they would have an innate knowledge kind of born from experience. And as you say, when these kind of like women's cycles were considered, very sacred and very spiritual, they would have this knowledge about what the moon was doing,
Mm.
and use these herbs or this potion. They were burnt at the stake.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of, whereas that ideally we'd all be going to live on a hill and cooking
Yeah, yeah.
rice.
Well, there would have been ceremony, wouldn't there? There would have been ceremony, and there would have been connection with the other women, and there would have been that experience. And I think, and like you say, they would become the wise ones. And I feel that that's what true female leadership is. But I feel society's trying to put women into a male leadership position, and it
Yeah,
doesn't work. It doesn't cross
no,
over, does it? I don't feel it
exactly.
does. We
No,
have a
and
leadership
it's
style of our own that's
yeah.
not being used. It's not being utilized by society.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting, talking to my friends, contemporaries, clients, that so many women actually, where they find the information is not from their GP, it's from talking to other women
Yeah.
who are going through it. So,
Yes.
there's kind of two ways to look at these sort of memes that go round on social media, and the symptoms like brain fog and whatever, where it's all, some people feel very defensive about it, but actually it's kind of, there is that reassurance and that security in sharing with others. And having, I know, with my friends, group of us menopausal women sitting around, and we're sat there going, the oh, jiggy, oh
This, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the doohickey, yes, that's it, you know and it's funny because nobody can remember.
Anything.
My kids now have to police me if I've said we need to go somewhere. We've made an appointment. We're going to the theatre or cinema or whatever. They like, double check. Have you got the ticket?
Mm.
Double check what it says on the ticket. Send it to me so I can double check it. And I think there is, yes, on the one hand, it's like, oh my God, where is my brain gone?
Mm.
But on the other hand, this is happening for a reason, okay?
Yeah,
It's not dementia. Many women think this is early Alzheimer's, I'm completely losing.
it can be frightening though. It's very frightening.
It is frightening, but what they don't understand is there's something is changing in the
Mm.
brain, but what's changing is what's supposed to.
Hmm.
It's exactly the way that when we go through puberty, if you have experienced pregnancy, going through that sort of that pregnancy transition, your brain has to update to it's like when you get on your iPhone,
Mm.
the iOS kind of 18.2 is due to upload tonight.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. We are uploading, downloading, I don't know, the latest um, version of who we are. And
Hmm.
inevitably, whilst that's happening, um, certain neural pathways are being pruned and certain new ones are forming. And that's bound to result in, well, one of the symptoms of it is this kind of this brain fat fog and
Mm.
loss of memory. It happens in puberty, it happens in pregnancy. In those two occasions, though, we're almost kind of told, yeah, this is tough, but you know what? You come out the other side and you're going to be a grown up, or you come out the other side and you're going to be a parent.
Mm.
When people get to menopause and that transition is happening, it's like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
good for anyone.
You're done now.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's awful. Isn't
I
it
know.
awful? It really is. And it's so not true.
Oh, it's so not
It's
true.
just, yeah, yeah. And I think any work being done to transform this mindset is really, it's just invaluable. It's brilliant that I think it's just really great that we're getting to speak about it more, and more awareness is occurring, and if it doesn't, like you were saying, even if it doesn't manage to reach, I suppose, the system, I don't know how powerful we really are to change the system, but maybe it's a case of stepping aside and creating a new system of, this is how we're going to do it now, because I think, um yeah, it's, as they say, it's a man's world. It feels sometimes that, yeah, you can kind of get lost in the soup of that, can't you? And feel powerless.
Yeah.
But we can always step aside and create new, and start afresh, and come together
Yeah.
in, as in
That's
circle, as we would have.
exactly. And that's one of the most powerful things I think about being at this stage.
Mm.
It's you don't have to please anyone. This is kind of the age of giving zero Fs
Yeah,
about other people's opinions. And I totally accept that for some people it takes a lot of work. That's why I'm here,
yeah,
to get to that point where you can give zero Fs, insert word of choice. But there is something very, very freeing about that. And actually thinking, do you know what? No,
yeah,
you don't have to justify it. You don't have to give explanations or excuses. No. Whereas kind of when you're experiencing these changes in puberty, there's so much kind of expectations and whatever of you to kind of achieve and do and be. But at this stage, this really is our time. And I'm not talking about, we should all kind of run out and burn our bras and,
yeah,
have hairy legs and whatever, if that's not your
yeah, yeah.
vibe. But it's actually, this is an opportunity to do the things that you've wanted to do.
Yeah, it's about coming back to ourselves, or come, I mean, some of us have never met ourselves. I mean, I had children
Exactly.
when I was a teenager, and I never really got to know me before I became a mother. So I think that an opportunity now, and for many others, it's there's a power in being able to say, this is who I am.
Yeah.
and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And what an opportunity now. Yeah, we don't have the responsibility of being, well, some people do have the still have, like you were saying earlier, still have that responsibility of being a mother. They're still in that. But for those of us that aren't, yes, it's like a jumping off, it's off the
Yeah.
cliff and free falling. It's exciting but scary.
But that's because anything new is
Mm,
scary.
it
That's how
is.
we are sort of physiologically, biologically designed to be scared
Mm,
that's new. Because if it's new, we we basically don't know where the saber-toothed tigers are hidden. And
no.
so, that sort of nervousness and that trepidation is simply our subconscious going, whoa, you could be eaten here.
Yeah.
So it's normal, but it's kind of understanding what my focus on my focus on my business is helping women to understand that fear doesn't necessarily mean bad. That fear could just be because this is a completely it's the new.
It's
But
unfamiliar. Yeah.
with that
Mm,
newness, with that unfamiliarity
mm,
comes a lot of opportunity for growth in any direction, depending very much on kind of what they want to do, where they want to be, who they want to be. And one of the most powerful realizations is that understanding that you, with the best will in the world, cannot change somebody else's behavior, responses, thoughts.
mm.
You can only change your own. And realizing that actually the responsibility for how you feel, how you behave, what you do is on you can be extremely liberating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Um, and it's as you were saying, it's a time for people to perhaps reevaluate relationships as well. So, I mean, that ties right into that, doesn't it? I suppose you've been functioning in a way for so many years with so many people, and all of a sudden, maybe you have this realization that yes, I'm not responsible for how they feel or or what they're up to or their behavior. That's quite, yeah, it's quite a shift in psychology,
Mm.
isn't it? But it's also liberating. And I think I wanted to just touch on the estrogen thing again. Um, so that east, I mean, I'm no expert really. I have no idea. I'm learning. So the estrogen, it's the nurturing hormone. Am I correct in that? So this
One of
is
the
what
roles it does, yeah.
gives us the instinct to nurture the babies and nurture the family and the husbands and
Yeah.
and the wider. So I suppose, yeah, if those energy levels are dropping, do you think we lose the desire to nurture, or are we turning it in on ourselves now, maybe?
I think so. I think there's a difference between you know the sort of nurturing we do when babies are small to the nurturing we do with adult children or partners as
Mm,
adults. Um, we seem the best way of putting it is we have a bigger bandwidth for that sort of thing when we are younger. And obviously this is generalizing because
mm,
some people just don't feel that way, and that's absolutely fine. But we have more of a bandwidth to be able to deal and work with everything that becomes part of that ability to nurture. Um, with the responsibility that goes with it. I mean, the best way I think is thinking of grandparents. If I think of my mum, the way she was when my children were small and the way that she is now with them as they're young adults, she's got infinite amounts of patience with them.
mm.
They, even though they're sort of in their early 20s, they go round there and she makes a fuss of them as if they were still little.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas with me as their mother, it's a joke that actually, if they ask me things at certain times of the day, I'm on it. I'm okay. I've got it. I've sorted it. Whereas if they ask me stuff when it's kind of I've sat down on the sofa at the end of the day and I'm knackered, it's like
Yeah.
off duty, kids.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sort it out yourself. I think it's easier to dish out the nurture, if you like, when you're not on 24/7.
Mm.
When you have downtime, which generally coincides with, if you have got grandchildren, you can absolutely love
Yes.
them, spoil them, nurture them, cherish them, but you get to give them back.
Yeah, so you have all that energy for them because you know
Yeah,
you've got a reserve almost, and yeah.
yeah, exactly. Whereas, when you're going through the sort of the menopause and that hormone starts to drop, it's, you know, another way of kind of describing it is, how if your house is anything like mine, you leave stuff on the stairs for people to take
Yeah.
up next
Yeah.
time they go up. And every single person in the family will continuously walk past that pile on the stairs. And every single time you get on and you do it yourself.
Yeah.
When you get to the stage of menopause and that hormone starts to drop, this becomes a big deal. This is huge.
Yeah.
This is absolutely the thing that is annoying you more than anything else on the planet. Because why can't your family lift their fingers,
Mm.
take it upstairs? It's that bandwidth for it shrinks for being
Mm.
able to kind of do everything that you have done for years, but now it feels like a really big deal. Does that make sense? It's not that you
Absolutely, yeah.
can't master, it's just you've just
It's
got nothing left at the end of the day.
Yeah, it feels like I said, it feels like perhaps now it's about turning that nurture inwards, and our boundaries change, don't they? I think
Yes,
we
yes,
decide now
that,
to care for myself, I can't give this energy to you anymore. To care for
exactly.
myself now, I can't do this anymore. And
Yes.
yeah, that's it's difficult for people around, but boundary setting is never going to be an unhealthy thing to do, I don't believe.
So,
It really isn't.
I think that's where a lot of people have difficulty because they say,
Mm,
"Yeah, but I'm being so selfish." You're not being selfish.
no.
You have to look after yourself before you can do all the things you have to do, which, as I said, is potentially looking after children, looking after parents,
Yeah.
running businesses, working full time. We have a lot that we need to do whilst all these hormonal changes and brain updates are going on.
Yeah, yeah. It's a huge part of our lives as women. So absolutely, if we can get a little bit of help, then that would be fantastic. So would you like to, before we go, would you like to tell people about where they can find you and just a bit more about your offer, what that is, and because I'm just looking at the time, we've got to wrap it up. And yeah, just direct people towards you and how you can help them, really.
Yeah. So you can find me at www.danidiosi.com. And on my website is sort of a bit of an explanation about who I am, how I help you, my harmony framework. I've got group coaching packages up there, but I also work on a one-to-one basis. People can choose to sort of pay as they go, or ideally they would kind of have a 6 session block so we can kind of work through the different parts of the framework. But it's helping with the parts that HRT cannot and does not reach.
Okay, so women that have perhaps tried HRT and they're still not settled and they're still
Or
experiencing
try
problems.
naturalistic remedies
Yeah.
and yeah.
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 Okay, lovely. And you work virtually with people or in
Yes.
person, both, yeah?
Yeah, yes. So obviously, if you're local, I can work in person, well, like in the same room,
Yeah.
but anybody can contact me from anywhere in the world, basically, because
Yeah.
we have the ability to Zoom.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you. It's been a really insightful conversation, and yeah, more power to you. And thanks for all the hard work. It sounds like you're really kind of on a mission. So,
Trying. Certainly trying.
all right. Okay. Thanks ever so much. Been great to talk to you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. Cheers.